How is everybody doing? And welcome back for another Strength Chat episode. Today, I have got a very special guest for you. Today, I'm joined by a coach with over 20 years experience. He's trained some of the biggest names in Hollywood, such as Ryan Reynolds and Emily Blunt. He's also been featured in publications such as Muscle and Fitness and Men's Health. Today, I'm joined by the one and only Don Saladino. How are you doing?
I'll take this intro every day. Thank you very much. I'm doing great, brother. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks a lot for taking the time to jump on. How are you? What have you been up to? What's been happening in your world?
Everything's good. We're dealing with this COVID stuff like everyone else. I mean, right now I have it and my wife has it. And, fortunately we're on I've got my facility and I can kind of just hibernate in here and nothing's really changed for me. I'm working out myself and building content and having fun with work. I mean, it's been you said over 20 years of experience and just kind of reminiscing on it. It's been closer to probably 25 now, and it's just been a while. It's been a wild ride. It's been pretty incredible, and I feel like one of the fortunate ones in the industry.
Oh, cool. And how are you feeling with COVID as well? Because I know obviously, when it very first happened, I know I had a lot of clients that were completely wiped out. Whereas now I think a couple of people have just had like small symptoms. Like how are you feeling with everything?
Nothing. Like I haven't lost a step. Like I'm maybe a little lethargic during the day, cold-like symptoms, runny nose, sore throat type of thing. But it wiped my wife out. I mean, she was in bed for 3 days, couldn't move, or maybe it was just an excuse. Maybe she just wanted time off. Who knows? But no. All in all, it's not a big deal. And it was, fortunately, it was the first time I've actually gotten sick since I want to say 2019 and right around there. So yeah, relatively healthy.
Oh, good. And how did you find everything? Because I know you mentioned there about being able to continue as usual and training and creating content. And I always like to ask questions because especially the coaches that I've spoken to, here in Leeds and other coaches that I've spoken to, I think different countries and different people have kind of used it as an opportunity to be able to make content or, adapt or change in terms of online training. How did you find everything over the last couple of years?
Well, listen, fortunately, we're on fire. I mean, it's just been, I got into the digital space back in 2010. So, I really got into tech around then. And I, started a company where I did a raise with a couple of professional athletes. And we launched a pretty incredible product that did well for a while. And then, I would consider it a failure considering what we had to sell it for. But, at that point, I was pretty much in on tech. And maybe not in on social media as much then, but social media still isn't even a reflection of your business. I mean, I don't get it. I mean, I'm going to Germany in a few months to give a business talk. I mean, I'm giving business talks probably every month or so, and I don't understand why people are affiliating success with social media. I mean, I know individuals that have 5-6 million followers, and they can't make 6 figures a year, right? And it's like, and I know other people who are maybe a couple 100,000 followers, and they're doing well into the 7 figures a year. So. I really think if you know how to pivot, if you're smart, if you understand business. I mean, I came from a brick and mortar space. I owned brick and mortar facilities in New York City for 15 years. I understood the tech space. So I really feel like I had my hand on the pulse and in several different facets of the fitness space. And I even see it right now. I see trainer coaches, making potential mistakes because they're in this period of let's just get into digital and I'm going to get client. Okay. How are you retaining them? How are you building your book? Why are you complacent and why are you sitting back with your hands here when you only have X amount of people? I don't get that. But I really think that comes down to your genetic makeup, and it comes down to, how hungry are you? How entrepreneurial are you? How often have you had to face adversity, and how, have you failed, in business? And I've failed plenty of times in business. And I think because of that, you really gain this knowledge that they can't even teach in school.
I think there's a couple of good points there, and it's interesting. I had a chat with a coach that I work quite closely with at the gym that I'm at, in terms of you can look busy in terms of posting quite a lot and making quite a lot of noise on social media, but not necessarily actually be busy. I think it's easy to look busy, and one of the key things that I think you said there is obviously be able to retain your clients rather than having just a big turnover all the time. So yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. And as well, with the amount of followers, it's how much you engage in those with those followers as well, which I think is really important.
We launched one facet of our business. It's just we probably have, I'd say, about 6 different arms. I like to call it pillars to what makes up Dino Brands, which is my company. And we have one of those pillars in itself is something that we started 2 years ago, and it's what actually requires the most amount of attention and engagement. But from a growth standpoint, I mean, to do, a 7 figures of profit in your first year, I think is pretty impressive. And it's like that line, sales are vanity, profit is sanity. I'm not talking about, generating $5 million a year in revenue like I did at both of my clubs. Like, what are you putting into your pocket? And, I really, it's disappointing to me because you look at coaches out there and you're sitting there and you're like, come on, man, like, be smarter than this. Everyone wants this free, income, this like, oh, I just want to put programs up and I just, I don't want to work and I just want this like continuous revenue. And I'm like, no, man, it doesn't work that way. Like, you've been a coach for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. Like, I've been a coach for 25 years. Yeah. I've done over 40,000 1-hour sessions. I've done, probably a half a dozen capital raises on my own, to angel investors. Like, I've had some that are successful and I have some that failed miserably. And it's just, this stuff takes time. It takes a level of patience. And, most out there aren't going to develop a sticky business from just launching an online business and just saying like, okay, like it's here to stay. Like, there's other things you have to do to be able to add the horsepower to your online business.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, and kind of given the next question that I was going to ask you to complete the introduction was, a bit of a background to yourself, whereas actually you've kind of ticked that box already, and it kind of nicely goes into the questions that I kind of wanted to touch on today. Is, especially with probably more so with COVID, with a lot of people, coaches just saying, I'm just going to do online coaching. That'll be dead easy. I don't have to go into the gym. Whereas, the experience that you have, the people that you've worked with, the gyms that you've owned, and the coaching hours that you've put in, to be like, and the people that you've worked with, that takes time. And what do you think, in terms of coaches getting involved in the online coaching side of things and trying to develop their coaching brand or reputation, in terms of, the starting point, putting the man hours in and, getting to a point where, opportunities will come up when, either social media will grow or their reputation will grow?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And I'm going to quote one of my closest buddies and one of my clients of 12 years, Reynolds, the actor. He was talking about growing businesses the other day on a little talk that I heard him give. And, he was talking about relationships, right? Like establishing relationships, nurturing relationships. And he used different words there, but that's basically what he got down to. And that is where the online coaching is going to create this level of disconnect. People want to do this, oh, it's more efficient with my time. And, oh, it's saving me 3 hours a day on commuting into New York City. And like there's all these positives out there, but shaking someone's hand is a lost art. All right. Picking up a phone and calling someone rather than sending an email or text, hearing the tone of someone's voice is the lost art. Actually sitting there and showing your concern for someone by your tone of voice or the look that you're giving them in the eye, that's a lost art. And that's going to be a part of this business that I think a lot of coaches are going to struggle with. Because let me tell you, some of the best pivots in my career, or some of the best business opportunities I've ever had presented to me, came through relationships, came through help, came through me, the fact that, maybe there was a highly successful individual, uber successful, that every morning I was just giving a hug to and sitting with that person for 10 minutes and just talking them out of a hole. And then they end up becoming a billionaire, and then they don't forget about you there. Or they end up opening doors for you or doing specific things. These are certain things that the online business is not going to give people. The first club that I opened, Drive 495, we raised about $5 million to get that club started. And, the director of the head of construction for a company called Millennium Partners was one of my best friends. And he came in and he did the whole job for me. Obviously, I had to pay for supplies and subs and all this stuff, but he came in and he contracted the job for me for nothing. Like I would never have had, he saved me X amount of dollars and he helped open doors for me, for people, like things like that. You don't forget, right? Like my entire path, even from building my client book, which I've done like a dozen times. Like I've literally built my book and passed it off to people, built my book and passed it off to people, probably at least a dozen times in my career. And like to the point where I literally have handed off almost every client. And why did I do that? Because I knew trainers coming aboard who were working for me who needed income. And I'm like, I'll be fine. Let me help you get started. Let me start dishing people out. My clients were cool about it because they knew we were trying to survive. And I went back in there with a level of confidence and I started my book again. But getting people like, Hugh Jackman, who was my first celebrity, that came through a relationship. That came through my buddy Rico Wesley, who had to leave town, and he passed Hugh over to me, and then that opened the floodgates. And then suddenly every person I was able to put my arm around opened the door to me for someone else. It's going to be difficult to have that you're going to be able to have relationships. You're going to be able to establish relationships and do good. But for a new coach on the floor who's trying to get their online business started, don't stop seeing people in person. Like first off, you got to get better at your skill. I feel like if you've been in the business for under 5 years, you're just not. Like I'm sorry, I don't care how smart you are. You're not there yet. You just aren't. Like 5 years is probably the number in my head. And why? I think there requires a certain amount of reps that you have to put in with a client. I know for a fact that there are circumstances that are going to happen that you cannot plan for or you cannot teach. People who come to you on the floor, just relationship wise, someone who's just having a bad day and is a high powered CEO that just snaps, like in the facility. How are you going to handle that? Someone has a meltdown. How are you going to handle that? A fight breaks out in the club. How are you going to handle that? The police show up to your facility. How are you going to handle it? These are things that just in time, like you learn how to deal with, and it makes you better. And suddenly you develop this intuition on how literally, I feel like my gift is when I have someone walk in, I can literally look at them. Like if I've been training with them for a period of time, I could look at them and be like, oh shit, here we go. Like this is going to be one of those days. Or like, all right, we're in a good place right now. Do you have the ability as a coach to flip that person, give them a 180? Do you have the ability as a coach to turn around and take that individual when they walked in on the hour and leave an hour later saying, oh my God, this is not a luxury. You are a necessity in my life. Where in the beginning I was, thinking about, budget, or like, I would hear this as a gym owner. Oh, maybe it's expensive, or this trainer might be, what's it to you? Like my goal as an owner, my goal as a coach, as that, the head coach in there, was to teach that to my coaches. How do you allow the individual to feel like you are a necessity and not a luxury? And when you can instill that in the client's head, it's over. You've literally found success in coaching in that area. Because if you didn't learn, listen, man, like you're a smart dude. And I know a lot of smart coaches, and it's like, all right, get out of the books. At a certain point, it's like, come on, enough's enough. Like keep learning, keep educating yourself. And I want you to do that, because you should want to be the best trainer out there.
Yeah.
But being the best coach is different than being the best trainer. You can learn everything you need to learn in the books, and you can fold under a situation and not connect with that person. So that's something that I feel like you're not going to get online.
I thought that was a good way to finish there in terms of training people how to squat, bench, deadlift, and all those sort of things. But you said it kind of at the start, that art of coaching, and a common theme that you mentioned was, developing relationships, knowing how to, if your clients had a bad day or a good day, or, change their mood. And that's kind of summed it up at the start when you said you've worked with Ryan Reynolds for 12 years. If you've worked with someone for 12 years, they've bought into you, they've got a relationship with you, rather than training for 3 months and then going, no, I'm gonna go now. There's a reason.
It happens sometimes. Listen, it's gonna happen sometimes. Like my first guy, Hugh Jackman, we spent a year together, but at a certain point, people move. People switch things up, they move around. Like it's nothing personal. It's part of the business, right? Like I can't expect myself to stay shiny and new to every single person that when I was working with clients. Now I'm not. Now I won't take you on. Like, it's just, I'm at the point in my career where if someone calls me and they want to work, I'll dish them off to people that I'm buddies with. I don't even want to cut from it. It doesn't matter. It's like, I've got my businesses, I've got my ventures, and I'm doing what I'm doing. But again, I paid my dues. Like, I was in this business for a long, long time.
Yeah, definitely. And as well, it's a journey, isn't it? You progress from, putting those hours in, especially when you mentioned there about the hours on the gym floor, because there's you mentioned 5 years there, but I know people have said like 10,000 hours of coaching. It's the same as in strength training. You need to do like so many hours, so many reps underneath the bar. You need to be able to have that experience there. In terms of the coaching side of things, especially from from younger trainers or newer trainers and coaches getting involved in coaching, but as well as the general population, with the people that you've worked with, obviously it's a case of we're preparing them for a film or a role, or but also to be healthy in terms of their lifestyle. What sort of the behind the scenes planning and scheduling in terms of how you working with them, and what are some of the obstacles and challenges that you found?
Well, listen, you always try and lay out the template, right? But you got to understand that 9 out of 10 times you're deviating off of that template. It's unrealistic. I started as a trainer, gone strength coach back in more like 2005, because I opened my facility, was a golf fitness training facility. And I started working with a lot of PGA Tour players, and was trying at the time to lay out these periodized 1-year plans where we're peaking at certain events, and then suddenly Morgan Hoffman's on a plane to Malaysia and gets a virus for 2 weeks, and you're like, all right, well there goes that. You're playing catch up for a month, and then psychologically maybe he's a little off, oh, I'm not back at my numbers. And it's just, I think it's a complete cluster, excuse my language, clusterfuck, but I had to use that word. But yeah, I think from a planning aspect, especially actors, I feel like it's more difficult than any athlete I've ever worked with. And, I know strength coaches like to roll their eyes, but guys, I've worn both shirts. I'm both. I've done it from the brick and mortar end. I've been a strength and conditioning coach, a personal trainer. I've done all this stuff. And it's just an actor, the level of volatility is so extraordinary, beyond something that I think any strength coach who works with a basketball player, they don't you have your schedule in advance.
Yeah.
And game time is what is it? 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. It's come on, man, that's a joke. It really is. I'm sorry, I'm not to knock it, but we knew, in the NFL, you knew Tom Brady's schedule last year. You knew when he was playing games. You know when he was getting hurt. But I even argue if his job was any less demanding than an actor, in an action movie. All of my actors in action movies, I had them break arms, break necks. How did you break a neck? Oh, I dove through a window. You what? Why didn't you do, sorry, it's my wife's phone. She's looking for this.
Oh.
Why didn't you do, why don't you have a stuntman do it when it's not as real, right? And then on top of it, well, how many hours a day do you think they're filming? Is it a 3 to 4 hour shoot? No, I don't think so. You've got a call time. I'm sorry, let's backtrack. You got a pickup time, which I've seen anywhere from as early as 2, 3 in the morning is a pickup time, to as late as, I never really hear the pickup times being, sometimes it could be, for evening shoots, but those evening shoots go overnight. So imagine shooting all day long, getting picked up at 5 a.m. When I worked at Liev Schreiber, Ray Donovan, he was shooting Ray Donovan. He would have 2-3 days where he was getting a 5 a.m. pickup, and then he would have days where he had to get picked up at 7 p.m. and shoot to 5 a.m. Imagine doing that now for 2 or 3 months. Tough, right? A little difficult to train and a little difficult to plan. You better know how to adapt. And that is something that professional athletes are just not going to need. You're on a film set, camera breaks down. Dwayne Johnson shows up 3 hours late. Everything gets pulled back, 3 hours. Sorry, DJ. Shot at you. But yeah, no one takes into consideration these variables. Everyone thinks that the actors have the private chefs and, oh, like these amazing gyms. Like, no, like that's not how it works. Like sometimes you're at a hotel, sometimes you are, maybe it's through COVID, maybe you're at a specific location and there is no facility, there is no gym. And the next thing you know, you're like training with bands at 4 a.m. Like, no fun, right? Like this. So there's so many variables that I think are not taken into consideration by the average Joe, and they just don't understand because they've never had to plan. They've never had a plan for someone in that situation.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, because you kind of think that you see the end product of people in they're really good shape, but there's a lot of work that's got to be put into there, because they've still.
Hold on, time out, and I don't mean to break in. Like the most important part we didn't even bring up. How about when there's time zone changes?
Oh yeah.
How about when someone's away from their 3 kids?
Yeah.
Right. And they're away from them. Or like, how about when my client's got to get on a plane and go to London for a month and she's away from her kids and she's sitting there and she's in a hotel room by herself going to and from work and she's not around people and, her child gets sick at home. Like that's stressful, man.
Yeah.
So sorry to jump in, but
no, absolutely. Because, some of the points that you've highlighted there, are the same or maybe an inflated version of what the general population do as well, going to work. But the fact is that taking into that travel or longer days or odd times and those sorts of things, and obviously especially from flipping it onto you as the coach, there's still sort of the result that needs to be having at the end, whether it's a certain physique or what they need to do for the film or the show that they're doing. And how do you kind of maybe manage the expectations of the results that they're going to get, but then equally be allowed to get to that point?
Yeah, I think it depends on who you're starting with, right? Like if you're starting with someone that needs some fine tuning, like a Ryan Reynolds or, a Sebastian Stan, it's like, you already know that, all right, just go through the process. We've done this so much. And if we just apply here, like we're going to be fine. If you got a newbie coming in who's spent a year training and he's trying to look like Chris Hemsworth, like I think early on we have to, and I've had when I had my club open, I had very well-known actors who've trained like a year and they're coming in and showing me pictures of Chris Hemsworth. And I'm like, listen, we're doing this naturally.
Yeah.
We're going to apply the best plan possible to your needs and your stress levels. Yeah. Okay. And we're going to have to adapt that day in and day out, depending on how diligent you are to your recovery program. Are you getting to bed on time, or are you up all night, dancing and, dropping ecstasy till 4 a.m? Like these are real things to talk to people about. And if it's the first, then we're going to be in a good place. If it's the second and you're wondering why your body's breaking down and why we're not actually seeing results, or if you're all over the map with your macros, or, if other things are going on, that's, not part of this plan. I need you to understand right now, I'm telling you, you've got one of 2 ways to go about this. You either do what you want, what I'm guiding you to do, or in all fairness, go work with someone who's going to kiss your ass. And that's where I am at my career, where I'd say 99% of the training planet is not. Like when they get around someone of that nature, they are excited. They're like, oh my God. Like I am like, no, I'm here to do a job. I'm here to establish a level of resiliency in you as the trainee. I'm here to make sure that, we do what we need to do aesthetically, but more important, that when you're shooting for 6 months, or whether you're, doing all day shoots and then all night shoots like Liev, how do we have that level of resiliency? How are we able to recover and bounce back day in and day out? And that's why it's not like the plan, man, it's like the easy part. Like I almost laugh, like, people who want to go look at a plan and they want to start making judgment on a plan. Like, I think it's comical. I mean, I think that shows how, I think small-minded a coach can be. Oh, well, this just looks easy. I'm like, really? Like you never discussed with me about, this client, this person's temperature, meaning like, where are they at emotionally? Like you haven't asked a question. You're just looking at 3 to 5 movements on a sheet of paper on top of all their mobility work, and you're passing judgment. So, there's a lot that goes into programming, and it's easier than just speaking to someone. It's a lot more difficult than just speaking to someone and saying, this is what you need to do.
Yeah, definitely. And I think especially when you spoke there about the relationship side of things, and managing all those variables that we've mentioned, how sort of from the plan to when they're filming to then the transition of just settling things down a little bit and getting back into a little bit more of a normal routine, because especially if things are changing quite a lot, it can be a little bit of a shock to the system when stress levels are quite high. If we've got early starts, late finishes, is there a transition point for sort of like,
it's different with every individual, because they all kind of come out of that phase differently. Emotionally, they handle that stress differently. I mean, it depends. Am I working with a method actor that's literally going to turn into that character for 6 months? Because I've seen some, disastrous, I call them re-entries. Okay. Like re-entering into their life. Like if someone's turning around and they're a method actor, and they're literally, for those of you who don't understand what that is, if they are literally turning into that character for 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, whatever it is, when they have to re-enter into like reality, I think that's something that I've seen is very, very challenging emotionally. Right. It's like they're re-entering into this phase of like normalcy, and they're almost struggling to do it. And that is, I would never mention names of people who've gone through that, but I find that very difficult, and you have to be very sensitive to that individual. Because what's the main goal at the end of the day? Like the main goal is to make sure that the person's walking around, that it's literally that simple, that they're moving great, they have a high level of energy, and we have some body armor on their body, whether they're male or female, because I want them to be able to withstand, that impact or that stunt or something negative, something abrupt. I want them to be able to handle that and rebound. But some people I know can come right out of, shooting, and like suddenly the next day they're like, hey man, like great to see you, I miss you, this and that. And in others, like I've seen for weeks at a clip, they're like, oh my God, like I'm in a tough place mentally. And then I think at that point, as a coach, not as a trainer, as a coach, you have to figure out what the right amount of dosage, what the right dosage is. Like, what is that right amount of stress? How are we going to allow them to feel like that they're successful? And to me, that's what coaching is about.
Yeah, I think that's especially when you've mentioned there about the method actors or being in a role. That's something that until you said then is something that you don't really think about, because depending on what they're in, I think mindset plays a big part in any training or results that we need to be that we're working towards, because it can be a case of not in a very good place, which is going to hinder results or stress levels or sleep and all those sorts of things.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I'll never forget years ago, there was an online coach who put up a picture of one of my clients and said, how to get so-and-so's body. Right. And I never really paid much attention to it. Right. And then I went back on YouTube and I started looking at a lot of these coaches. How did so-and-so get ready for this role? And unless that coach who trained that individual put that content up, there is no way in God's name they would ever know. And I can't believe how much it is. It's like, and a coach turned around being like, no, I'm just repurposing information out there that was in the magazines. I'm like, well, it's probably false, first off, right? Like, these magazines are printing what they want. But secondly, it's like, you don't know what this person had to put in to this role. And I was on a podcast and actually called the guy out, which I've never done. It's the only time I did it in my life. I've never called anyone out, but I'm like, you got to hold yourself to a higher standard. You can't mislead young kids, or you can't mislead adults and tell them what it takes to get this person ready for that role, because you don't. Because you didn't know that person might have, broke their ankle for that role. And because of that, we suddenly had to really revise our lower body training. or, maybe they had a wrist sprain, and, that's why he was using push-ups, holding on to dumbbells, or like a perfect push-up. He couldn't go into that, couldn't go into flexion or extension. So suddenly they might see a client of mine doing something. They're like, oh, that's how they do it. That's the best way to do it. I'm like, no, we were just working around injury, right? Like we just like, oh my God, like he's trap bar deadlifting. Like, yeah, like I love the trap bar deadlift. Like, don't get it twisted. But we were doing that because, Y did not work. X did not work, meaning that specific movement. Sorry, I'm losing my voice.
That little bit that you just said there, it's as though you've sort of predicted what I was going to ask next then, because saying that in terms of, articles of this magic exercise, this program, do this workout. And
I won't even talk about it. I won't even go there. When people ask me that, I'm like, it's not even a point. Like, magic exercise, like what is it? Like I can have someone come into me that has, a laundry list of injuries, and then I'm calling my PT Charlie Weingroff, and we're getting the team to work on this individual, and suddenly like Charlie's like, all right, this, and this, and you're like, okay, let's just train the shit out of that, because that's all this person can handle. Like that's the magic exercise. Like the magic exercise is, when it's time to put our foot in the gas, what movement can we do that safely with? And what movement can we get a response off of? Now, notice how I just said response. What response are we looking for? Are we looking for hypertrophy? Are we looking for performance? Are we looking for resiliency, which some could say has to do with performance, but not entirely. Like I've had like when I got David Harbour ready for Hellboy, he was having back problems. I'm allowed to talk about this because it was public, but we had, I think, 8 or 9 weeks, and he came in, he's like, I'm having back problems. We assessed him. I brought my PTs out. We looked at it, like no red flags. We just need, let's work on his hinge, let's just get his core strong. Let's do all the basics, like all the basics. It was just, he was undertrained. And I remember he struggled to pick up a 24-kilogram kettlebell off the ground as in a sumo deadlift position. And I think 8 or 9 weeks later, he did a conventional deadlift for 400 pounds.
Wow.
At probably an 85 to 90% pull. He's like, let's go up. I'm like, you're done. No. Let's hit it again. I'm like, you're done. You're flying to Bulgaria tomorrow. You're on a plane. I am not hurting you. The day before you're traveling, you're going to be on a horse in 2 days. Brother, you're done. And he's just like, you're right. I'm done. But the point of that program, he was in a prosthetic suit. It wasn't to have him look like an Abercrombie model. It wasn't to have him look like, an enhanced Wolverine, someone who's 30 pounds bigger than Hugh Jackman, because he really was. He's 250 pounds. At the Q at his biggest was maybe 205, 210. The goal was resiliency. The goal was to make sure that when he got into that suit, he felt like Hellboy, that his body was be able to withstand all of the work that he did over those next few months. And that he felt, and that was a big, he called me up and he said, man, I feel great. He goes, I'm putting this suit on and I just feel strong. And if he was putting that suit on and he was trying to act while his back was hurting and he felt weak, well, we're not really doing him good. So it really, like, this transformation thing that everyone talks about, what I do, it's wrapped in so many different shapes and sizes. I've had people come to me and they're like, I need to look like Brad Pitt in Fight Club. I'm like, okay. And I've had people come to me and they're like, oh my God, I got to get stronger. And if I lose a pound, they're going to throw me off the set. Like I can't lose any weight. Right. So, and then suddenly like things are going to change pretty drastically according to the goal. But from a magic exercise standpoint, like, what the magic exercise is: execution. What level of intensity are you going in with? What level of intensity have you earned the right to do? If your body is taxed, if you're stressed, then maybe 80% is what we need right now. Right? If you've earned the right, or if I'm getting someone ready for the stage, or if it's literally about body composition, all right, maybe there's a block during the year where we are going to failure. Maybe there's a block during the year where we are anywhere from 2 to 5 reps in reserve. That's part of the program. Most people will think, well, I can go harder. I'm like, harder isn't part of the program. I thought you wanted to progress. Well, I do. I want to get better. I got to go harder. I'm like, that's not what progressing is. And I think it's educating them there. But I'm at the point in my career where I just don't have to work with that person. Like I take on projects. That's it. I take on people who come in and need to get from point A to point B, and have a specific goal in mind. And like, all right, let's let's go, let's run with it. And they really need me. But, if someone's coming in, they want to do like hour sessions, they want to do one-offs, they want to pay me $1,000 an hour, I'm not doing it. It's not where I need to put my time and energy.
Yeah, I think that whole bit about the magic exercise side of things, I'm just going to put that snippet and just share that, because you mentioned there a lot of other variables, the stimulus, the fact that if someone's hurt their back, there's no point, because if they're injured, not feeling strong, and then they have to go and do a role where they are strong, that's not going to be beneficial to them. And everything that you mentioned there around the exercises, there's a reason for that, and knowing that we don't need to then push even further. We've got to that point, we've got where we need to be, right? Let's move on from there and make sure that we're not injured, because then if we're injured, we're not going to be able to do all the other things that we need to do, which you mentioned a couple of times about, right, we're going to do the assessment side of things. We need to know where their starting point is. You can't just say, well, we're just going to throw this exercise in for the sake of it, because if we injure them, they're not going to be able to get the results that they want from there.
Right.
In terms of because obviously we touched on the training side of things, what sort of the conversation or the talk that you have on the nutrition side of things as well? Because I know obviously you mentioned with the we don't have chefs all the time for their role. How do you manage their nutrition when they're traveling, especially if people are looking to either drop weight or stay the same or even increase the weight?
I think it depends on how severe of a change do we need, right? Like, I think if it's something where I'm getting, I just fortunately, I was able to be on the second cover of Muscle and Fitness since 2018. I was actually on Muscle and Fitness, Men's Health, and Muscle and Fitness again this last October. I think it was October. I do have an issue in here, but it was their first issue back. And, I needed 4 weeks to prep for this because that's all they really gave me. But, to be able to get your body to that point in 4 weeks, I didn't cut carbs. Like, when I say cut carbs, like, I'm going into shoot day, I'm probably 300 grams of carbs a day. And people are like, well, why? How can you do that in 300 grams? I'm like, no, I'm like, it's metabolic flexibility. It's allowing your body all year long to be able to process protein, carbs, and fats. I'm in single digit body fat all year long. Like, my energy level's high. My body feels amazing. I'm 44 years old. I'm moving better. I'm stronger. Like, I'm just, there's a specific amount of work and understanding about nutrition that you need. And the biggest mistake that I see is when someone's living in one zone all year long. Now, if you are like an intuitive eater and you're turning around and you're, like my buddy Robert Yang, he's one of the most brilliant nutritionists out there. And he's, doing his, protein, fiber, fat, and his meals are like his protein, and he gets, starches in at a certain time, and he's always vegetable, heavy. He's always plant strong, and he's always getting a certain amount of micronutrients in. He's going to be just fine. But the person out there that's always having that monotonous same routine, like they're just having chicken and rice every day and they think that's healthy. I'm like, that food's not alive. Like, chicken and rice, like, there's nothing, like, there's no micronutrients in there. There's nothing, there's no colors, there's no, like, your body, like, we have to think about getting our body stronger hormonally, right? Like, we have to feed our body the nutrients it needs to be strong. And then you obviously have to manipulate certain things to where it looks, really strong and lean. So I think the answer to the question is, it really depends. Like, how does this person handle nutrition? What is their history? I mentioned Ryan a couple of times. I mean, he's my poster boy, but Ryan's, the second Ryan has to get ready for something, I was like, all right, did you start? Yeah, I started. I'm like, okay. That's basically like, well, let's, and I'll stop by his house and I'll kind of look at what he's doing. I'm like, well, you may want to think about this. Or I remember when I met him, and I'm allowed to talk about this, I always say that because I would never disclose anyone's private information. But I remember when I met him, he was on really low carb diets for these roles. And I remember, like, it was tough on his energy level. It really wasn't good for him. From an energy standpoint and an emotional standpoint. And I think when, we started upping his carbs and we started working on his metabolic flexibility, we started understanding, healthy fats and all this stuff. And, I remember, I think Deadpool 2, we took a look at him. I'm like, this is the best I think you've ever looked for any role. Like, this is, it might've been Deadpool 1 or Deadpool 2. I think both roles, I think he just looked better and better each time. And, that's in his early 40s. Right. So for someone to be doing that this late in the game, I know for a fact that people just approach nutrition the wrong way. It's the same formula all day long. They're not giving their body the nutrients it needs. They're not paying attention to using fats and carbs as their energy source. They just want to go in one direction. And especially with bodybuilders, like when you're going on low carb diets, like if you don't have your fats at a certain level and you don't have enough fats, and you don't have enough carbs to burn as energy, what are you going to burn as energy? Protein. Protein is not an energy source. Protein is a muscle building block. So you're going to start converting protein to its energy source, which is an unnatural process. And your body's going to become less efficient at using what should be its energy source. So that's when we get into the talk about metabolic flexibility. That's what it's about. It's about being able to utilize, both energy sources and allow your metabolism to be efficient. And, but to answer your question, I know I went off on a bit of a rant there.
No.
It's different on each individual. I mean, how Sebastian Stan or how, we're looking at Ryan Gosling, worked with him for a short period of time, hit someone like that with that type of body type to prepare for a role is going to be much different than getting like a Liev Schreiber or a Drew Powell or like someone who's a little bit bigger or a Dave Harbour, like bigger guys ready for a role. It's going to be entirely different.
Yeah. When you mentioned there, because obviously you mentioned how people can sometimes go wrong and have low energy, and you mentioned there about Ryan Reynolds having low carbs. Where do you think people do get it wrong or get this information from? Is it a case of a re-education, or they've maybe
they're just not educated? Because it's very easy to quantify success with the scale, right? Like it's very easy to jump on the scale and say, I'm trying to get leaner, I'm going to cut carbs. Oh my God, I'm down 5 pounds, right? But like, if I cut my carbs, there's a term we use called getting flat. Like the muscle's not going to hold its pump. It doesn't have any glycogen in the muscle. We're going to become flat. And my body's going to look like a sheet of paper. It's not going to have that fullness, that muscle pump that, a lot of, people who train understand. What an incredible feeling that is, right? So, I think there's a lot of bad information out there. And I think people are like, well, I don't process carbs well. I'm like, you're right, you don't, because you haven't had them in years, or you're constantly starving yourself. Like there is this reintroductory phase that has to happen. There is this period of like, getting your body used to consuming, fats again or carbs again. And yeah, if you're not having carbs and you suddenly throw 300 grams of carbs in, you might retain a lot of water. Like, can we, get your calories back up to your TDE? It's your total daily energy expenditure. So like the total, like we burn calories at rest, which is our resting metabolic rate. And then there's, non-resting energy expenditure, right? So that's like our activity level. When you combine those together, your resting energy expenditure, your non-resting energy expenditure, meaning I'm sitting down on the couch, how many calories I burn, plus me moving around, walking, treadmill. When you combine those, you equal your total daily energy expenditure. And if you're constantly undercaloried, your body's just going to become less efficient at burning calories, right? But me, I'm always trying to push that envelope. I'm not trying to like gain weight, but I understand that when I'm having a high calorie day or I'm in a surplus, I almost feel like I've kind of established equity, right? In my body. I'm like, oh my God, this is great. If I'm living in low calories for a day or two, might be fine if I'm carb cycling or whatever. But if I'm always there and the body's just like, all right, felt great the first 3 days, I'm on day 8 of this and I feel like complete shit, you're not giving your body the energy it needs.
Yeah, definitely. I think there was throughout that entire chat, there was a lot of really good points and some really useful information there, and a really good insight into, it's not a case of, never eating carbs, having a crash diet, trying to have, unrealistic expectations, and also, being able to develop relationships and, the importance of mindset and feeling good. And the last question that I always like to ask is, from everything that we've chatted there, from either new coaches listening or, from people just getting involved in training, what would be your take-home points or words of wisdom?
Enjoy the process, man. Like you've got to, I truly believe you have to be a bit obsessed with something to be really like great at it. And if you just want to go and break a sweat, and then, you know what, man, like I get it. If you just want to go and you want to be in the training business to train a couple of people, that's fine. If you want to be great in those areas, you got to become a bit obsessed with it. And I think with that obsession has to come a level of, work ethic. It has to come a level of rerouting. Like, okay, we're going in this direction. We may have to pivot. There has to become a level of patience. And there has to be this level of just enjoying the process of going in every day and working. Because, there's very few trainers that can say that they're making, 7+ figures a year, right? Like, but in doing that, like, don't be obsessed with, the money. Be obsessed with helping people. Be obsessed with the process. Be obsessed with that one individual that you're working with, whether it's online or in person. Like, just give them, like, turn around and build. And like, why don't you become really good at what you do, right? Like, because then the best way of building, one of my favorite ways of building things is through word of mouth. Like, I don't care, digital marketing and digital paid spend and all this stuff. Like, yeah, you need all that. Word of mouth is pretty special. Yeah. Like, word of mouth is normally how someone can build a business without a budget early on. And I just think in getting to that point, you got to go into work. And when you're working with that person, make them feel like you're the only person that, that they're the only person that you're seeing, in that given day. And just really just love and enjoy what you're doing. It's pretty difficult to become great at it from a business standpoint, or even just a physicality standpoint. Like, those people are like, oh, I can't get to my goals and this isn't working for me. I'm like, dude, you're always miserable. Look at you. Like, your attitude sucks. Like, clean your attitude up. Like, what's that have to do with it? Like, I'm doing this program. I'm like, no, man, but you're always expecting something in return. Like, you're always wanting something that's quantifiable. How about just going in and doing the plan and leaving there and feeling good? Like, when I finished my training session today, I have COVID right now. You know how happy I was? Seriously, I finished. I looked at my guy Rob over here, who works for Dino Brands, and I'm like, man, I just feel great from that. Right? Yeah. Was it my best ever? No. I went in, I did what I had to do, and somehow I can leave every session feeling this level of success. Where most people want to point out the negative. I never left a workout and been like, that sucked, this and that. I'm like, you know what? Got it in, feel great. And every time I come in here and I leave, I almost feel like I'm setting a PR in a way. Like, that's how I feel. And I think that needs to be, really worked on throughout the years.
I think that was some great points and some great words of wisdom there, especially from, the experience you have and the journey that you've had in your career to at the point where you're at now. Thanks a lot for taking the time to jump on. Really enjoyed chatting with you. For everyone listening who might have any questions about what we've chatted about today, see the content that you put out there and look at your brands, where can people find you or reach out to you?
I would go to donsaladino.com. It's my site. We're actually revamping it right now. Again, trying to always improve. My Instagram's Don Saladino. I think those are easy, ways. I mean, if you guys DM me, I'm normally able. I mean, a lot of volume on there right now, but I do my best to try and respond to everyone. I got a really good formula. It was like you, when you reached out to me, it was just a really nice message.
Yeah.
Like we never met each other. Like, it was a really nice message. I get reached out to daily about a podcast. I was like, no, it's a really nice message. Like, I like this guy already. Like, solid, right? Like, I have other people like, what do I do for this? And you're just like, delete. Like, I don't respond to it. So it's like, that's how I wean through who I want to take seriously and who I just will delete. That's the only way. That's a very honest answer. Like, all you got to do is be nice. If you're nice and you're welcoming and you have a question, hopefully I can get to it.
Awesome. For everyone listening, 100% check out the work that Don does. Thanks a lot for taking the time to jump on. Thanks a lot to everyone listening, and I will see you all next week.
Thanks, brother. Take care, my man. Nice meeting you.